Hi, it's Katrina.
Number 14.
Ancient horses. Archaeologists in England have discovered a Roman horse that died 2,000 years ago. Alison Dickens from the Cambridge Archaeology Unit says the horse was found buried in a pit that she believes was used by the Romans for quarrying gravel. Slightly to the north of the site was once a Roman settlement, and the horse had been buried right at the edge. The animal appears to have had a broken leg at its time of death, which is usually the death sentence. But in this case, the broken leg shows signs of healing, meaning it must have been euthanized after whatever caused the injury. It may have been a working horse used for bringing construction materials to the nearby settlement. It also could have just been somebody's friend, a pet horse that someone loved enough to give their own burial. Romans had a special place in their society for horses. They had stallions from across the globe, gathering the best beasts from Persia, Armenia, Turkey, Spain, and Libya. Interestingly, there were even some horses that the Romans completely bedazzled in beautiful silver armor.
Number 13.
The death whistle. There was nothing quite as terrifying in the world of the Aztec as the death whistle. This whistle was used in certain areas of ancient Mexico to produce a haunting sound that would intimidate enemies. The Aztec were extremely proficient when it came to making whistles. They were able to imitate animal calls and the noise of windstorms. Somewhere along the line, they realized how to make a whistle that imitated the screech of death itself. It's most certainly not a musical instrument, with most historians believing it had to do with dark death rituals. I mean, here, listen to it and tell me what you think. You can currently purchase a death whistle online for yourself. Maybe you want to terrify the neighbors. But there are only a handful of real ancient whistles left in the world. In the 1990s, archaeologists found one of these authentic whistles clutched in the hand of a skeleton who was sacrificed. This individual was killed in a death ritual and then buried outside a temple dedicated to the wind god. The skeleton wasn't alone either. There were many other victims found in the same complex. Archaeologist Salvador Guillem Arroyo said they were all likely part of the same ritual during the time of the Great Famine of 1454. The Aztec were facing an extreme drought. They lost a huge amount of food, and many of their people were starving. And in times of great stress, the Aztec often resorted to mass sacrifices to appease the gods. Although it's called the death whistle, some experts believe it wasn't meant to sound like the final wails of a dying person. Instead, the whistle was likely meant to mimic the wind, summoning Ehecatl to take away the souls of the sacrifice victims.
Number 12.
The tomb of Minotaur Island. Archaeologists in Greece have discovered an ancient tomb that went untouched for over 3,500 years. The tomb was uncovered on the island of Crete, belonging to a man from the Minoan civilization who died around 1400 BC. That was at a time when Crete was ruled by a civilization that may have harbored a monstrous minotaur in an underground labyrinth. You know the story. The grave was discovered by accident when a local resident nearly fell through a hole in the ground. He stumbled upon an underground cavern that had been sealed with clay. Archaeologists were able to go down through the broken opening in the ceiling, which sat just over 8 feet underground. Once inside, they found a massive tomb divided into 3 chambers, with one room containing the sarcophagus and preserved skeleton of an unknown person. It's not clear who the skeletal remains belonged to, only that they were Minoan. The Minoan civilization cropped up on the Mediterranean island sometime around 2600 BC. They flourished for about 1200 years before their abrupt and mysterious extinction. Archaeologists only found proof of them in 1900 when Sir Arthur Evans unearthed their capital city of Knossos. It was this city that myths claim was home to the legendary King Minos, who commissioned a labyrinth to keep the monstrous Minotaur trapped. The Minotaur supposedly lived at the center of the labyrinth and was fed sacrifice victims until it was defeated by the Athenian hero Theseus. Amazingly, archaeologists have found evidence of a suspected labyrinth in recent years. Many mainstream scientists believe there truly was a large maze on the island. However, nobody can say if it really contained a beast with the body of a human and the head of a bull.
Number 11.
The strange Siberian skull. Inside an ancient burial mound, archaeologists found the clay likeness of a young man. The mound was uncovered in the Siberian wasteland, way out in the middle of absolute nowhere. Russian archaeologists excavated the site and took the mysterious clay head back to their research labs. For years, nobody knew exactly what they'd found. It looked as though someone had made a clay cast of somebody's head, then buried it alongside their body. It was first discovered in 1968, but the strange truth of the skull was only recently uncovered. In 1971, scientists used new and improved X-ray technology to look inside the clay head. However, the results didn't provide the details they were hoping for. All they knew was that something strange was going on. The clay skull appeared to be made of more than just clay, but it wasn't until 40 years later that scientists would finally have the technology to solve the mystery once and for all. Researchers have now used fluoroscopy imaging to look inside the clay sculpture. I don't know what that is, but they found it to be made not only out of clay, but out of sheep bones. Apparently, there is a ram's skull underneath the outer layer of clay. But what in the world was the point of this? The mystery seems even stranger now. The individual was part of the Tagar culture, which practiced extremely bizarre funerary rituals. They would often create massive crypts and stuff them full of hundreds of bodies. Then they would burn them to the ground. The ram's skull covered in clay that was made to form a human head must have been part of an unusual ritual that was practiced 2,100 years ago in Siberia.
Number 10.
Mysterious Japanese statue. The Kofun period of Japan lasted between the 3rd and 6th centuries, and it was a time of obsessive burial customs. Those who had any kind of power in society were buried in huge tombs shaped like keyholes. They were also laid to rest with impressive figures known as haniwa. These haniwa statues were made from either clay or wood and typically depicted warriors, shamans, animals, and weaponry. Modern historians and archaeologists aren't even entirely sure what the purpose of these strange figurines was. Some believe the haniwa were meant to be vessels where the spirit of the dead could live, like wooden containers for the soul. The depictions of armor and weapons may have been designed for warding off evil spirits. The animals were likely part of a goodbye ceremony, meant to see the deceased off into the afterlife. These figurines were found in nearly every aristocrat's grave from the Kofun period, but a huge haniwa statue was recently discovered in Osaka Prefecture. A remnant of a wooden figurine that once stood over 12 feet tall, it's now believed to be the biggest wooden haniwa in Japan, yet nobody knows what it is. There is nothing left of it except one big fragment. It's just a single mangled piece of Japanese umbrella pine, the preferred wood of powerful people during the Kofun period. The haniwa could have been a giant sculpture of a person, or it might have depicted a god, but at the moment there is just not enough pieces of it to know for sure. And now for number 5. But first, I want to give a big shout out to NightGuy34 and John Crow for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 9. A magic bullet. Archaeologists excavating the ancient city of Yavne in Israel came across what they've claimed is a magic bullet. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, excavators found a small piece of tan lead, a 2-inch projectile used 2,200 years ago. Before guns and crossbows, people used slingshots for ranged combat. They would put a small piece of lead into the slingshot and whip it around in the air before launching the bullet at their enemy. This particular bullet was found engraved with a magical inscription. Greek letters carved delicately onto the bullet read, "Victory of Heracles and Hauronas." Heracles, of course, refers to Hercules, the legendary hero known for his immense strength. Hauronas was the patron deity of Yavne when it was under control of the Greeks. The inscription on the bullet was calling for the Greek heroes to grant the shooter victory. Archaeologists say this wasn't that unusual. Professor Yulia Ustinova from Ben Gurion University was responsible for deciphering the inscription. weapon. She said people often etched messages into their projectiles as a way to energize their sling bullets with magic. They really believed that if they wrote the names of their favorite gods on the bullet, it would be imbued with supernatural strength. The bullet itself was likely used during a conflict between the Greeks and the Hasmoneans in the 2nd century BC, but in reality, nobody knows for sure. As far as archaeologists are aware, it may have been a murder weapon wielded by an angry soldier. Number 8. The Vanishing of the Catacombs. There is no place creepier in all of France than the dark and clammy catacombs beneath the streets of Paris. Underneath the Arc de Triomphe, slithering alongside the metro tunnels and extending out to the edges of the city are 6 million skeletons. Over 150 miles of quarries were once beneath the streets of Paris, although many of these tunnels have since collapsed. In the 1700s, cemeteries suffered from overcrowding, and the city needed something to rid them of the horrible stench of rotting bodies that filled the street. So Paris set about creating an underground crypt and eventually moved all the bodies out of their cemeteries and into the new catacombs. The idea was to get rid of the dead and bury them underfoot so that the people of Paris would never have to worry about them again. On April 7, 1786, the quarries were officially closed and the catacombs were opened. The 6 million bodies are still down there today, but it's not the catacombs themselves I'm talking about. It's the strange and bizarre disappearances that have been happening here for decades. Tourists used to be able to crawl through the catacombs at will, but starting in 1955, tourists were restricted to a specific area because so many people had gotten lost and died in the tunnels. One of the strangest incidents involved an illegal catacomb explorer finding a camcorder. The person was supposedly exploring the catacombs with some friends when they came across a random camcorder sitting on the ground. They took it home with them and watched the tape, and what they saw left them utterly speechless. The man on the tape had been filming when he got lost. He then soon became disoriented and dropped the camera. The video shows the man running off into the darkness and was never seen again. It's believed he died in the Paris catacombs, somewhere in the forgotten tunnels, and his bones are now lying amid 6 million nameless medieval Parisians. Number 7. Creepy ancient masks. The Star Car Mesolithic archaeological site can be found about 5 miles from Scarborough in England. Many believe this to be the most important Mesolithic site anywhere in Great Britain. It was occupied over 11,000 years ago, and shortly after, it was flooded. Afterward, the whole area filled in with peat, which prevented the organic material from rotting. Archaeologists now have discovered a treasure trove of preserved jewelry, human remains, and tools from prehistoric people who lived during the Ice Age. A long list of amazing things have been found at the site over the years, but recently some extremely creepy artifacts have been pulled out of the ground. Researchers have apparently found strange deer skulls with carved eyes at the site. The deer skulls were broken apart in such a way that they could fit easily on a human face. Huge holes were also carved into the bone so that whoever was wearing the deer mask could see. Archaeologists are torn over what the purpose of the bizarre deer skull headdress was. Any ideas? Experts at Cambridge claim they were used as camouflage when hunting. A group of 24 hunters would have covered their faces with the deer bones to blend in as they crept through the woodland. However, others believe the artifacts were part of some strange religious ceremony. Whatever the case may be, the headdresses are definitely bizarre. Number 6. Roman dodecahedrons. An amateur metal detectorist has found a fragment of an ancient Roman dodecahedron in Belgium. The individual was looking for treasure near the small town of Cortesum when he came across a piece of one of the strangest artifacts from Roman history. The fragment belonged to a dodecahedron that measured almost 3 inches in size. There are about 100 Roman dodecahedrons that have been found throughout Europe. Each one of these artifacts is unique, cast from metal to form a perfect 12-sided polyhedron. Each face of the dodecahedron has a hole in its center, yet no hole is exactly the same size as another. But besides the holes, there are no distinctive markings to be found on the dodecahedrons. They're pretty plain looking and don't seem to have served any purpose, and scientists don't really know what to make of them. What's even more mysterious is that these strange artifacts don't seem to have aged all that much. The 100 Roman dodecahedrons barely show wear and tear that you'd expect to find with relics over 2,000 years old. It's like they never even aged at all. The stubborn truth is that nobody can say what these things were used for. If not for the hundreds already found, we wouldn't even know about them. They weren't written down in any books, and there weren't any ancient historians that talked about them. It seems like they were so common that they weren't even that important to talk about. Theories range from knitting to astronomical devices to a tool of some sort to a children's toy. What do you think it was for? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 5. Ancient Chinese ketchup. Not many people know that good old-fashioned ketchup was invented in ancient China. Ketchup, the word itself, means preserved fish sauce. It comes from the ancient Hokkien language that's still spoken in some parts of Taiwan today. It got its beginnings around 200 BC, when clever chefs experimented with fermented fish sauce in China. The recipe soon spread to Vietnam and Indonesia, then eventually it made its way across the globe. We know it made it to Rome within at least 200 years because of a strange archaeological discovery. Researchers found a 2,000-year-old container on a Roman shipwreck with remnants of a fish-based sauce called garum. It was one of the very first versions of ketchup that made it to the Western world. But of course, the recipe changed over time. It would be in the 1700s that chefs in Britain tried creating ketchup using anchovies, walnuts, and even oysters. In 1742, the recipe for catch up contained beer, anchovies, cloves, pepper, and boiled mushrooms. Interestingly, tomatoes didn't get involved in the production process until the 19th century in Philadelphia. And so, in that regard, modern tomato ketchup is very much 100% American. But the original recipe started in ancient China. Number 4. Neanderthals wore body glitter. Let's face it, our ancient cousins, the Neanderthals, have historically been stereotyped as chest-thumping, feeble-minded barbarians with absolutely no sophistication whatsoever. Even scientific scholars and experts have described Neanderthals using terminology and statements such as cognitive inferiority and devoid of symbolism. However, a series of discoveries in recent decades challenges this possible misconception of Neanderthals as simplistic, talentless, primate-like creatures. Good thing too, because it's believed that Homo sapiens mixed with Neanderthals every so often, and some people even have Neanderthal genes in their DNA. In 1985, archaeologists found pigment-stained cockle shells that resembled necklace beads, along with an oyster shell containing pigment, while excavating the Cueva de los Aviones in Murcia, a city located in southeastern Spain. These items, which are thought to be around 50,000 years old, suggest that Neanderthals may have had a little more finesse than they're typically given credit for, at least when it comes to self-adornment and style. Let's face it, we've always wanted to look good. The theory that Neanderthals valued appearances was supported even more in 2008, when a pierced orange-colored scallop shell with traces of red and yellow pigment was discovered at another cave, this time on another expedition led by João Zilhau, a professor of Paleolithic archaeology at the University of Bristol. Based on the findings of pigment-containing shells, archaeologists began to speculate that the shimmery, colorful substance was intended for cosmetic use, perhaps as makeup or body glitter. Actually, they were unable to come up with any other explanation. These types of discoveries came as good news to members of the archaeological community, many of whom seem to take prejudice against Neanderthals rather personally and are determined to overturn the widespread belief that they were stupid. Number 3. The Swedish Atlantis. In 2013, Swedish divers made a remarkable discovery in the Baltic Sea. Everyone got very excited, believing that finally Atlantis had been found. While it's unlikely to be the Atlantis of legend, the Swedish Atlantis is a kind of ancient compound with artifacts dating back 11,000 years. The site in question is a sandy bay, where 50 feet beneath the surface, preserved in organic sediment, are numerous pieces of wood, flint tools, animal horns, and ropes. This environment has almost no oxygen, helping to keep things almost perfectly preserved. This rare preservation process means that this is one of the best troves of Stone Age artifacts that has ever been found. ever. Archaeologists are now in the process of excavating the entire site. The tools, methods of animal preparations, and even the discarded trash gives an incredible insight into how people at that time lived and what the environment used to look like. They have even found the remains of aurochs, which were the ancestors of domestic cattle, and the last of them died off in the early 17th century. The people at the time were nomads, so there is no real connection to the great lost city of Atlantis. And so the search is still on. Number 2. Lcekayan. It's long been known that the Romans and ancient Greeks were years ahead of their time in terms of construction, but a discovery that was made in 2017 reinforced quite how advanced they were. Excavations around the port of Corinth revealed extensive Roman structures. These were the remains of Lcekayan, one of 2 ports that connected the ancient city of Corinth with the Mediterranean trade networks. Corinth was a powerhouse during the time of Caesar and saw huge amounts of construction to ensure that it remained that way. Today, though, very little evidence of Lcekayan remains, which is why this discovery was so enlightening. It showed that the port was constructed with both an outer and inner harbor, with quays made from 5-ton blocks of stone. There was a large lighthouse and a giant structure in the center, which is thought to have been a religious sanctuary. Along with the large foundations, smaller artifacts such as ceramic, seeds, bones, and pieces of wood from around the world were found, which also helped to understand just how far Romans were trading. Unfortunately for the citizens of Lcekayan, the newly built port didn't last for very long. Even though it was supposed to last forever, it was destroyed during an earthquake at some point between 50 and 125 AD, and most of it fell into the sea. Number 1. The oldest piece of gold. We love gold. It has long been a precious metal used to depict status, wealth, and been used as currency. It's been present in a number of ancient civilizations, but a discovery in 2016 is thought to represent the earliest use of the metal on record. Found at a dig site called Tel Tanat site in Bulgaria, this tiny golden bead that's just 1/8 of an inch across has been dated to 4,500 BC. It's by far the oldest piece of processed gold that's ever been unearthed. The settlement that once stood there is said to have been relatively advanced, and maybe even one of the first in Europe. It was surrounded by a wall that was about 9 feet tall. The people there probably made everything on site, including the bead and a wide range of ceramic bird figurines that have also been found, which they used in ancient rituals. The town finally succumbed to invaders in 4100 BC, but that was after its people developed industrialized metal production, trade routes, and even some of the first written manuscripts. Pretty advanced stuff. Thanks for watching! What do you think the original ancient version of ketchup tasted like? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up for more. See you later. Bye!